Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be back after having taken a break and to be able to speak to you all again. We had the tremendous privilege of being able to get away from the heat wave earlier in the summer here in London, and then the storms that follows, and to enjoy the tranquil beauty of the Scottish Highlands. And whilst we were there, I spent quite a lot of time thinking about simplicity and getting back to basics, back to nature. Maybe it's an overly superficial view of life out in the countryside, but certainly from the perspective of this Londoner here, a lot of being away was just about seeing the simple life. And we were staying on a small croft, really just a strip of a couple of fields of quite poor quality, rough land, which was just capable of supporting a few sheep. And every day we would wake up and we would see the fields in front of us, and the hills and the mountains in the background, and two sheep who had adopted our family for the time of our stay used to come running over, buying desperately, and we would feed them by plucking some grass from the ground. And for some reason or other, they preferred the grass that we plucked for them over the grass that they could graze for themselves in their own field. Truly, even for sheep, it would seem that the grass is greener on the other side. And because of this time that I spent away, I really just want to share what I think is quite a basic but fundamental thought on this week's Sedra. And this week's Sedra is packed with mitzvahs, the largest number of mitzvahs in any one Sedra in the whole Torah, about 74 in total. And it's a little bit of a study in its own right to understand the sequence of mitzvahs, what links each mitzvah with the mitzvah that came before it, and the commandment that comes after it in the chain of mitzvahs in this week's Sedra. But I want to focus on the last Parsha in the Sedra, which is the Parsha of Zochar, remembering that which Amalek did to us, its vicious and evil attack against us, and to destroy everything that Amalek stands for. And this is a difficult mitzvah, a troubling mitzvah, to understand how it fits in with the rest of the values of the Torah. But that's a subject for another day. For this particular session, I want to focus on something else, which is how does this mitzvah of Amalek tie into the mitzvah which precedes it, the penultimate mitzvah in the Sedra, which is the mitzvah of honesty in our business affairs. The Parshat tells us that we should have honest and just weights and measures. Don't use an overly light weight when measuring out the goods that one is selling to someone else. Don't use an overly heavy measure when measuring out the payment that receives or the goods that one is purchasing, but be absolutely honest in one's business affairs. Now, how does this mitzvah link to the mitzvah that follows it, the mitzvah of Amalek? So Rashi answers the question midrashically by saying that as a punishment, a consequence of dishonest business practices, enemy attack follows. But I want to share a thought from Hirsch, from Samson Raphael Hirsch, in which he gives a spiritual and moral message to the link between these two mitzvahs. And he says that the Torah is telling us about the fundamental and basic and essential importance of honesty to the possibility of sustaining a spiritual life. And in the same way as Amalek threatens our very spiritual and moral existence, slipping into behavior which is less than absolutely honest, in which we aren't being completely fair to the other, in which we're taking advantage of people's vulnerability, that is as destructive to the possibility of true spiritual life and success. And in the same way as Amalek is rightly condemned for taking advantage of those who were weak and were trailing after the rest of society, so too this mitzvah of honesty teaches us that we need that fundamental truthfulness and fairness and justice in our lives, not exploiting those who perhaps can be taken advantage of if we want to have a foundation to our spiritual existence. And if we lose that, we become Amalek-like. We begin defining strength and success in terms of the power of the sword, in the pseudo-glory of taking advantage of others, rather than realizing where it truly lies. If our faith in Hashem is to have any meaning, then it has to lead us to reject any dishonesty towards his creatures and to behave with perfect and purest fairness towards others. And this takes hard work, to take an honest look at ourselves, how we live, how we conduct our affairs, whether it's in business, finance, and relationships, and to be honest with ourselves about where we're perhaps cutting corners, rationalizing, self-justifying, being less than 100% honest, being unfair to those who are weaker than us, whether in the setting of family and personal relationships or wider life and business. And it is this self-honesty which is the first and foundational step to teshuvah. Before we can contemplate self-improvement and change, we need to be honest with ourselves about where we're up to, what sort of people we are, what we're like, to audit what we're achieving and to what degree we are living up to our own values, never mind the values of the Torah. We're now only 3 weeks away from Rosh Hashanah, and now certainly not the time to take a trip to the Highlands, but perhaps we do need to bring a little bit of its calmness, its tranquility, and its isolation back into our own lives, to give us a chance to do some reflection and thinking, to take a little bit of time out from the busy pace of life, to spend that time with ourselves. No matter how busy life is, it's surely possible to find a few minutes a day just to do a little bit of thinking, to engage in what the meditative traditions in Judaism call hitbodedut, time spent boded, alone, to weigh up and evaluate our own weights and measures, to check whether we are prioritizing our affairs proportionately, and whether we are being absolutely, no ifs and no buts, no rationalizations and no self-justifications, but cleanly and transparently, absolutely honest with ourselves and with others. Not an easy task, but hopefully a worthwhile project to start our Elul on. So I wish you all Shabbat Shalom, and please God we should be all well and have every bracha, every blessing in our lives. Amen.